Hello everybody and welcome to a very important video. This time we're going to talk about why playing video games on easy is perfectly fine and why you should never ever allow any online community or any community for that matter make you feel bad for playing video games however you want. We're going to take a look at a few seemingly intelligent arguments that people use against playing video games on easy, against playing easy games, or modifying video games to make them easier. And through personal examples, I'm going to explain to you why you should not fall for these arguments and change the way you play or enjoy video games. Argument number 1. Difficult video games build character and make you a better person, supposedly. You learn discipline and patience, perseverance, and so on. The second argument is that apparently you're not playing video games the way the developers envisioned them, and therefore you should feel guilty about that and not play games on easy mode or find ways to modify the games and make them easier for yourself. The third argument is that easy games provide no sense of accomplishment. You're more satisfied apparently after having gone through a very difficult, grueling period of frustration on your way to the goal, which is a whole lot of horse crap if you ask me. There is no doubt that video games can be very inspiring, that yes, they can teach some people discipline and perseverance, that they can affect people in very positive ways. However, the problem isn't that I'm trying to deny that, because I am an example of a person who has been very positively affected by video games because they have always been an inspiration for my own art. And I owe a great deal of my successful career as an illustrator to video games. However, the problem arises when people who prefer more difficult video games believe that everybody should have the same approach towards gaming they do, and that everybody should find the same value in games that they do. And if you dare prefer easier games or like to modify games to make them easier or even use cheats, they're not only going to look down on you, but they're going to preach at you as to why your approach to gaming is wrong. In reality, there is nothing wrong with liking more difficult video games, modifying games to make them more difficult, or modifying them to make them easier. So before we get into it, I want to say that for me, video games have always been pure fun first and foremost, and nothing else. They're also a huge inspiration for my own art. Now, there's one thing that video games are not, for me, and that is a measure for my worth as a person. And the reason I'm saying this is because one of the first arguments that people have had against me on video game forums and such for playing video games on easy was that they claim those people who play video games on hard difficulties or play difficult video games are somehow improving themselves as a person. That somehow video games are part of whatever self-improvement people should be doing. And that is just ludicrous to me. It doesn't mean that playing video games on higher difficulties alone improves you as a person. It all depends on the person playing the video games. Ever since I was very little, I never measured my worth as a person through my accomplishments. I work as a professional illustrator even though I'm severely visually impaired. That is no small feat. But I never decided to work as an illustrator in order to overcome my disability. I simply work as an illustrator because that's what I find fun, entertaining, and that's what I want to do. Yeah, my disability is a hurdle that I had to overcome in order to draw and in order to play video games, but it's by no means something that I feel has made me a better person. It's not to say that I'm not proud of my real life accomplishments. I absolutely love my art, flawed as it may be. I'm very happy to be where I am at in life. However, I'd be danged if I used my video game accomplishments to determine my self-worth as a person. I measure my worth as a person based on whether or not I'm good to those around me, to my pets, to other animals, to other living beings. And that's how I see people. I can respect somebody for the accomplishments that they've made, but if they're a bad person to me, or just in general a bad person, their accomplishments mean absolutely nothing to me. And that's how I see myself as well. So while yes, some things are worthy of respect, I'm not going to have video games determine my worth as a person. The argument that some people on video game forums have been using against me, that I should supposedly measure my worth as a person based on the accomplishments I make in video games, or that video games are going to teach me how to be a more responsible person, a more disciplined person. Maybe that works for some people, and there's nothing wrong with that. If they want to feel that way, that's okay. But don't expect everybody else to feel this way. Don't expect everybody else to have this approach toward gaming, because to some of us, video games are just pure fun and nothing more. So this argument is moot right off the bat for me. It means nothing to me, and of course I'm not going to go out of my way and change the way I play video games just because somebody on the internet or somebody wherever decided that, hey, I'm going to be a better person if I play more difficult video games. I mean, come on now. That's just insane. People fail to understand that we need rest, we need relaxation, and if video games provide that, then so be it. We can't keep constantly pushing ourselves in everything we do. That's not healthy. It's not normal, in my opinion. It's important to understand that if I want to play video games on easy mode, I will. If I want to modify my video games to make them easier, I will. If I want to use cheats in single-player mode only, of course, I will. And that does not decide what type of a person I am. And don't let anybody else shame you into thinking that you should play video games a certain way, because supposedly certain ways of playing video games make you a better person. That's just a whole load of nonsense. This is going to lead us into the second argument that people have been using against me for preferring easier games or playing video games on easy or even using cheats. And that is that apparently I'm not playing video games the way the developers intended to, and I should feel so guilty about that. Now, being a professional artist myself, a professional illustrator, often an argument that people would use against me for playing video games was, you're not playing the games as the developer intended. Easy mode is not what the developer wants you to play. And my answer to that is, I don't care. I am playing the game on my own time. I'm playing the game in the privacy of my own home. I'm enjoying my game however I want, because this is my time to have fun. The developer may have had certain ideas, and if I find something interesting about the game but dislike certain other aspects, I'd rather play it than miss out on it and play it my own way. That includes easy mode, which is included in the game, modifying the game to make it easier, using cheats if I have to. It doesn't matter. It's my own choice. It's my own fun and my own idea of fun. And because I play video games for fun, there is nothing wrong with that. To me, the argument makes no sense. I have had entire bloody essays written at me on forums about why the way I play video games is wrong. And they never could change my opinion, because in the end, I'm the one playing the games. I'm the one spending what little time I have on this earth to enjoy those games the way I can. So why should I abide by some rules and unwritten rules that some forum people made up? That makes no sense to me. It's not realistic. It's completely insane to me for me to abide by these unwritten rules and play games a certain way, because supposedly I have offended some developers somewhere halfway across the world, somebody who doesn't even know I exist. And most developers don't even know my country exists. To me, it seems that people don't play video games for themselves. They play video games for a perceived community that dictates how they enjoy things, what they enjoy, what they can and can't play, how they can and cannot play. Now, I'm not one to say that gatekeeping is not okay, because I myself am a gatekeeper to a certain extent when it comes to gaming, and that's okay, and I understand that. However, there's a limit to that. I can tell somebody that, hey, you're not playing enough games, I can't consider you a gamer because all you play is Fortnite or whatever, and you haven't experienced anything else. But I'm not going to go and judge somebody because they wanted to play a game on a certain difficulty that to them is fun. Whether you want to play on the hardest possible difficulty, whether you want to mod the game to be even more difficult than what the developers intended, or you want to make it easier, that's on you. That's your time, your fun. It's interesting to me how people don't complain when people add mods to make games more difficult. Yet they lose their minds when somebody tries to play games in a way that makes them easier. That tells me that many of these people play video games to prove something to themselves because they're not satisfied with who they are. And unfortunately for them, I don't understand that feeling because I've never had a time when I haven't been satisfied with who I am. No amount of written articles or texts can convince me that playing video games however I want is wrong. Of course, there's nothing wrong with trying a game out, seeing if it's for you, and if it's not for you, you're free to do whatever you want with it. It's your game, you're the one who bought it or rented it or borrowed it. It doesn't matter, it's your own time. Now, I have had people who have flat out told me that it's better for me to miss out on a game and not play it rather than to play it on easy or to modify it. And that is completely insane to me. I cannot even begin to relate to that type of mindset, let alone try to understand them. The best I can do is read what they're saying, shake my head, rage at them or ignore them. But I cannot see what they're saying as something healthy. I see it as something very sinister, it's very unhealthy, it's very confused because it's not normal for me to have somebody dictate how I do what I do when it comes to gaming. Video games are just toys. Nobody told me how to play with my toys when I was a kid. Nobody told me if I was allowed or not allowed to make crossovers between Ninja Turtles and Masters of the Universe and whatever Transformers or whatever Thundercats toys I had. Nobody said any kind of rules about who the bad guys or good guys are. I would do whatever I wanted because they were my toys and I had my own fun. So why would I have somebody dictate and preach to me how I play my video games? It makes no sense. Why are so many people judged whether or not they play games on easy or hard, and they're guilt-tripped into believing that the developers don't want them to play the game like that? I don't care. Like, the developer can say, you're not allowed to play my game. Like, I don't care. When Returnal originally came out on PS5, it was simply unplayable for me. I cannot stand roguelike games because they require a level of perfection that I simply cannot attain. Especially with a 3D game that was very difficult for me to see. Often enemies would attack me from outside my narrow field of vision. I couldn't see the terrain, so I'd fall down pits and take damage, yet the game requires me to be near perfect if I want to make any progress. I really wished that it would be a normal action game instead of a roguelike because I can play games that leave a lot more room for mistake just fine, but not ones that require perfection on my end. Returnal is one of the few games that I've ended up selling after buying. I simply couldn't justify the money I spent on it because it was just so insanely difficult for me. There was nothing fun, there was nothing challenging about it. It was unplayable. When the game came out on PC, I was able to download a mod that changes the roguelike nature of the game into a proper arcade game with a number of lives you can set for yourself, opens up the game for a lot more room for mistake on the player's end, and that made it so much more enjoyable. I can now play Returnal as I would any other action game, and it's a phenomenal experience. I still die, the game is still very challenging, but it's not impossible for me to play now, and I've made substantial progress in the game. So as you can see, there's nothing wrong with adapting a game to your needs, even if that may not have been the developer's original vision. I wouldn't have experienced this world of Returnal had I not modified the game to my needs. Another great example is, and I don't have footage of this, but when I played Sekiro, this was a very grueling and difficult game for me. Not because it's overly complex or anything, but because I simply cannot do parry mechanics well. And I can't always see things well. For example, it took me 9 hours to beat Madame Butterfly. I couldn't see all her attacks. I couldn't parry her. There was so much trouble with that boss. And I spent 9 hours trying to beat her. And the only reason I bought Sekiro on Steam was because there was an easy mode mod. But the dang mod wouldn't work for me. So I tried playing it without the mod. Fortunately, after I beat the old hag, I got the mod to work. And as soon as I installed that easy mode, and as soon as I got the mode to work properly, Sekiro became one of my favorite games of all time. And I finished it with, I believe, what was the best ending. I had so much fun with the game. But the game was not the game that the developers intended me to play. It was the game that I wanted to play. It was still Sekiro, it was still that amazing world. But the challenge was more catered toward my abilities. And I had so much fun with that game. It's one of my favorite games of all time now. And yet, if that mod wasn't available, I would have never experienced Sekiro at all, because I couldn't justify to myself that I should spend countless hours trying to get good at this game just to be frustrated at the next opponent and so on. It's just not what I enjoy in video games. So I've had people tell me that, hey, what if somebody buys a book that you've illustrated and they start drawing all over your drawings because they like it that way? It's their book. I don't care. If I sell somebody a drawing, whether it's a commission or whatever, and in the privacy of their home they decide to modify it because they want to look at it like that, that's their business. I've sold a drawing to them. There's a difference between somebody modifying my drawing for themselves and the difference between somebody modifying my drawing and selling it as theirs. And that's not what we're doing. We're simply playing games on easy mode. I'm simply modifying games however I want by downloading mods, but I'm not telling the world, hey, I made this game. I'm just playing it however I want. So you really cannot have that idiotic analogy that if somebody took my drawing and modified it, that I would be upset. They paid for that drawing. They can do whatever the heck they want with it. Or they found it online, saved it, they liked it, but they wanted to make some improvements, so they made some improvements to it that they think are better, maybe I don't. So they like looking at the drawing like that. That's their business. That's not my business. I can't control how people feel, and I don't want to control. I want to control how everybody feels at the end, but it's not realistic. Like, I understand that just because I want everybody to agree with me, that's not going to happen. And just because I want everybody to have a more casual approach to gaming, it's also not going to happen. But to expect me to have this insanely hardcore, serious approach to something that I consider fun, that I do for relaxation, for enjoyment, that ain't going to happen. I understood this when I was very little, that I'm playing games for fun, not to be frustrated with them. And that leads us into the next argument that people have used against me for playing video games on easy. Supposedly, you enjoy your accomplishments more if you had a hard time getting there. That is a whole load of horse crap, if you ask me. Everybody has a different way of finding joy in their accomplishments or creations. And never once, not even when I was a kid, have I ever found joy in accomplishments after a lot of frustration. In fact, many of those accomplishments would often feel like empty victories to me because I had spent so much time being unhappy, being frustrated, time that I could have spent enjoying myself and enjoying my life more. There is no greater joy to me in life than easy victories. Victories where I don't frustrate myself on the way to that accomplishment. That's when I'm the happiest. That's when I feel pure joy. And a good example of this is Kena, the game for PS5 and PS4. Now that game isn't overly difficult, but it does have some difficult combat, especially when the bosses are concerned. Clearly, after a few bosses, or maybe I can't remember now, it's been ages, but one of the bosses was really giving me trouble. And I was not having fun. I was going to drop the game when I realized that, hey, look, I can change the difficulty midway through. So what I did is, I set the game to easy, and I beat the boss, and it was pure joy. I felt so good about everything regarding this game. I was so happy. Now, after that, I figured, you know what? Let me see, because we had a huge argument on GameFAQs over this. And after that, I was like, all right, I'm going to try and beat this bloody boss on normal difficulty. Because they're trying to convince me at this point that I would feel a lot more joy and I'd be happier and more satisfied with myself, apparently, if I were to work harder towards that victory. And if I accomplished that victory, and if I beat that boss, I would be so much happier. Horse crap, that's a lot of bollocks, as they say. I'm trying not to curse. I don't even curse anymore. So what happens is, all right, I decide I'm going to waste some hours of my life. I'm going to try to beat this boss, see what happens, even though I know exactly what's going to happen. So I end up beating the boss in normal mode. It's a difficult battle for me personally, and I felt absolutely nothing. There was no joy. There was no fun to be had. So what if I beat that boss? I didn't feel anything. I just wasted my time trying to prove something to some idiots on a forum. But I had to do it just to give them that, because I'm an honest person. If I felt happier that way, I would have said so. Nah, there was nothing there for me. That wasn't fun. Yet setting the game on easy was so much fun, I couldn't stop playing it until I finished it. We have to understand that there is absolutely nothing wrong with enjoying difficult video games. Some people find a lot of joy in accomplishing difficult tasks, and that's perfectly fine. Just don't expect everybody else, again, as we said, to have that same approach, and don't look down on people if they don't want to put the time and effort you put into video games, because that is your own choice to dedicate yourself to video games so much. Not everybody has to do that. Not everybody has to dedicate themselves to video games the way you do. Or perhaps they can dedicate themselves to the game, but in a different way. Let me give you an example. I have finished and played all Souls games except Dark Souls 3. I just never got around to it. I like over-leveling myself in Souls games. I like finding the strongest weapons for my builds. And I enjoy the games by having an as easy time as possible. This is very important because you have to understand that, well, Souls games don't necessarily have easy mode. They give the player the choice to be so overpowered that they can make the games easier for themselves. They're still difficult, but they're much easier than a player who wouldn't grind or who wouldn't overlevel. When I played Bloodborne, there were these dungeons that you could enter a code in, and the dungeon would just overlevel you. It's some exploit or other. And I happily used that exploit in order to enjoy the game more. And I still found the very final boss of the game incredibly difficult from the DLC. And believe me, beating that boss did not bring joy to me. I just felt I did finish it. I did beat the Orphan of Kos or whatever it's called. But I didn't feel much joy from that boss fight, because I spent so much time on it that it just was not fun to me anymore. To make things even worse, and I'm not trying to use this as a justification, but just as an example, I couldn't see anything because I'm severely visually impaired, as I said. I couldn't see which move the boss was about to make. What I tried to do is I tried to learn the sounds the boss makes before each move, and that did help me a little bit with its first phase. The second phase, I just lucked out and somehow beat it. I don't ever want to experience anything like this in a video game, and I do not consider it an accomplishment. In fact, this boss alone, even though I finished it, ruined Bloodborne for me. I loved the game because I was overpowered throughout the game and I had so much fun, and then this boss comes and all the overpowering meant nothing to the boss. And I felt no joy. I felt no joy beating it. I felt no joy accomplishing that difficult task. All I remember is that I was frustrated and I didn't want to give up on the game because I had finished everything else in it, and I figured, you know what, I'm just going to beat this one and move on. And while I still consider that to be a 10 out of 10 game, this boss is something that I do not remember fondly. Maybe somebody else does because they love a challenge, but I don't, and I don't have to love a challenge. Being overpowered in RPGs and in games has brought me so much joy throughout my life. Whether I've accomplished that through legit means in the game itself, or by using easy mode, or by modifying the game, or using cheats, it doesn't matter. What matters is that being overpowered in games has brought me so much joy, and I feel that I love gaming to this day as much as I did when I was a kid, because I never pushed myself and I never frustrated myself with playing video games. They were simply always pure, relaxed fun for me. And sure, of course, I have had certain games frustrate me and upset me, and sometimes I do want a challenge, but if I don't feel like challenging myself, I don't have to do it. And I don't feel obligated to do it. And that's important to understand. You should never feel a certain obligation towards video games. It's your video game, it's your fun, it's your way of playing, so play however you want. As long as you keep it to single player and you don't affect anybody else's game. Understand yourself well and understand what makes you happy. And approach video games in the best way possible so that you have fun with them and that they make you personally happy. And that they make the time you spend with them worth it. It doesn't always have to be about some kind of improvement. Just having pure fun is more than enough to have time well spent doing something. Always remember that you play video games for yourself. You don't play video games to prove anything to anybody. You don't play video games to prove anything to yourself, probably, or you shouldn't in my opinion. But if you really need that, yeah, do that. But if you really psychologically need to play video games a certain way to prove something to yourself and to feel better about yourself, that's your choice. But don't expect others to take that same approach to video games. Never expect others to have the same approach to video games you have. So have fun with your video games and do not be embarrassed or ashamed to admit that you play video games on easy. Don't give into people's pressure and complete and utter nonsense that you should play video games a certain way. Don't be embarrassed of the way you play your games. Because that just gives people who want to control your behavior even more power. But if you stand up to them and tell them that you play your video games however you want, there's literally nothing they can do except whine online. So that's about it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I thought that this was a very important subject to talk about, and we're going to have more videos like this in the future where I discuss certain subjects that I think are very important to gaming and how we play video games and how we approach video games.